The next session is about tools and innovation. So now we are looking into the future. We have been looking a lot about what happens with what is the status today, the current status of the Web Accessibility Directive, what have been done since the start, and then how can we kind of slowly move forward when it comes to policy and so on. But now we're going to do something that is maybe cooler. We were asked to do cool things, so now let's be cool and look into the tools and the innovations and the tech stuff that may help us to change things and go faster forward. So I've asked Hita Defies to make a short introduction of this. This was also kind of an impossible task to talk about everything that may happen in the future in 10 minutes. But, so thank you for accepting that. But I know you can do it. And Hita is a front-end accessibility and design system specialist. And I think you are a freelancer these days. So yes. Yeah. So good. I didn't forget your affiliation. So, but please.
Cool. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a question people start to ask when something becomes difficult. Can sort of technology help us? Maybe. So I wanted to highlight a couple of different technological innovations that may or may not help. You mentioned who I am, so I can actually skip this, but I work at NL Design System at the Dutch government, do some other things as well. And one of the things that I've done a lot is web development. So I've been a web developer and I've turned into an accessibility specialist. And that means I have lots of friends who are web developers and they ask me questions like this one: why isn't accessibility easier? And they especially asked me this when I started working at the W3C and worked on some of these documents that explain how to use the standards and all that. And people just get really confused sometimes by these documents and they want to know what to do. There are developers who have bad intentions, or they are like, well, I'm not going to do this. I hate this. And there are developers who actually want to make websites accessible, but they don't know necessarily how. And that is because there's lots of different tools and things that they need to know about. Like there's different standards, there's different types of documents, there's different laws and policies. There's stuff to know about accessibility statements and lots of things that aren't official standards, but are still documents that people need to look at. So there's a lot to know. And I want to highlight a couple of different tools that are good for users, for content editors, and for web developers. In that order, it's kind of inspired by the priority of constituencies that is invented at the W3C for making standards. So they want to prioritize users over, and I'm not going to say it wrong, but over developers and then over browser makers and over spec makers. So the users are the most important part, right? So it's about people. So that's what I'll start with. Can technology actually help end users? And I think there are ways. The main way that I think technology can help end users directly is by putting some remediation stuff into browsers. And I gave a talk about this a couple of years ago where I pushed for this and said, I think there are things that are in WCAG, in the standards, that we require people to build into websites, that even if they don't build into websites, the browser could still go and fix the problems. Now, there are things like color contrast. Like if a color doesn't have enough contrast with the background, we could put a color behind that does have enough contrast. That's something that a browser could do. The designer or the developer of the website might not like it, but the browser could step in and say, we're going to do this because the user wants to have the contrast. And the same for focus indication or auto-playing GIFs. These are all things that browsers could potentially fix. And I wanted to help standardizing some of this as well. We started a community group for it. Wilco was involved with that too. At that point, we never actually got around to making this work, but some of this stuff is actually in browsers today. Like they did improve focus indication, and I think auto-playing GIFs is something that some browsers stop now. So that's cool. Browsers can help users. Now, technology can also help content editors, so people who make content for the web. And one instance of that is CMSs. So I believe that CMSs could be seen as accessibility assistants. So just like Clippy back in the day when you used Microsoft Word or something like that, you could have a CMS that shows you content as a preview and then explains you this is wrong, like you're not using the right headings, or you have some color that doesn't have enough contrast. That's actually something that's built into the Gutenberg editor in WordPress. So when you change your color to be something that doesn't have sufficient contrast, it's going to warn you about it. And I think that's great because even as accessibility professionals, when I'm putting something together like this presentation, I might forget about color contrast, even though it's my day job to tell people to get their contrast right. So I think putting assistance into CMSs is a great way to kind of try and address this as well. When I work at a CMS called Sanity, I also built something that would check content on the fly and tell you about things like, this is not a heading, it's bold text, but maybe it should be a heading, or maybe this should be a list or something like that. There are lots of things that a CMS could find about content. And the cool thing about fixing a problem in the CMS is that you're fixing it before it goes live, right? When someone edits content is a really early stage of the website development process, right? It's way before the user sees it. So I think that's very good timing. Now, as a developer, I'm obviously also interested in how technology can help developers. I think developers are responsible for a lot of inaccessibility on the web. So if we can help them, that's in all of our benefits. There was a tool that was launched last week that promised to say you can have production-ready code generated by an AI. So it would have a prompt, you could tell it, build me a navigation, and it would go and do that. I put some warnings there. That's very risky and likely very harmful. And the reason for that is that these kinds of tools are built with lots of testing data, like data to train these tools. And I don't know about you, but I don't know about a lot of websites that are actually very accessible and perfect. That doesn't actually exist. So to make a tool that is the promise is to do production-ready code, I don't think that's fruitful and outright dangerous, because if people believe in this kind of thing, then we'll end up with a lot of inaccessibility that's also automated. So we'll get bigger problems than we already have. But there are other things that are great about AI, I think, like captions and transcripts. When I make a video and I put it on the web, I put it to YouTube, it will do automated captions. I spend like 2 minutes to fix the problems because I speak with a weird accent, right? So I find out my problems, I fix them, and then I publish it. So AI is really good at that sort of thing, recognizing what someone's saying or what's on a picture even, especially if it's in cases where accuracy isn't very important. So with front-end components that I mentioned earlier, accuracy is very important. It can be the difference between accessibility and inaccessibility. When it comes to doing things like captions, they're always going to be imperfect, even if a human captioner does it. So some imperfection is probably okay, unless it's about life-threatening situations, then an inaccuracy can also be dangerous. Okay, then technology can help developers as well as some kind of built-in thing to the tools that we use to develop with. And one of the tools that people who build for the web use a lot is HTML. So it's the programming language that is the basis for all websites out there. And I'm involved in an effort called OpenUI, where we're trying to invent new HTML elements that are accessible by default. That's the promise. The reality is that is actually very hard and takes a lot of time. So no guarantees, and it's a progress thing, but I think it's really helpful to have tools in HTML that are accessible by default. So if someone wants to have like a video player, if there is an element that can do a video player for you, that's great, because that means we can fix accessibility problems at the HTML level and at the browser level, which brings me to my next point. The browsers would then need to be very good at accessibility, right? So the video player that's built into browsers does have some accessibility problems, unfortunately. But the good thing about those problems is that they exist in the browser level and not in the individual website level. There's trillions of websites out there. There's only 3 browser engines. So if we find the people who built those browsers, put them in a room and force them to fix the problems, then that's just 3 rooms that we need, right? For all web developers, that's a lot harder. Okay, so then brings me to the next thing. We could also build accessibility into design systems. I'm involved in a design system at the moment, and I think the cool thing about a design system, it's basically a set of building blocks for websites that you can define, is that you get to reuse and repeat patterns. And if they are accessible patterns, that means you're repeating accessibility, you're reusing accessibility, you're making it available for more people to go ahead and use it. There is a word of warning, because if you build inaccessible patterns, you are also going to repeat those. So do make sure that they are actually very good and accessible. The cool thing about design systems is that they allow for like documentation. You can build very complex components that then get reused. You can test in there as well to automate the testing, and you can do lots of documentation and say, do this, don't do that, and kind of help people on their path to accessibility. And I think this kind of thing can be a really good complement to conformance type of stuff. So you can tell people, yes, you have to meet the WCAG standard. And then you can also tell them, here is building blocks to actually go and do it. Because I believe that practical side is really important, because just conformance is probably bad. Now, one last thing that I think tech can help developers is as assistants, because you can meet people where they are, and that's definitely the case for developers. They work in tools like code editors and also browsers. So I think there are lots of very useful tools that can actually check code automatically, like X that Wilco is working on. Like there's lots of really good tools to help developers get it right, basically. So that brings me to my conclusion. That design systems can make accessibility reusable, browsers can auto-remediate content, HTML can have more accessible components built in, AI can recognize stuff, translate things, be helpful, but it can't be trusted to generate components. And yeah, that's my introduction at just 10 minutes.
Perfectly timed as always. Thank you very much, Hide. So now let's see, you have already stated what we should think about AI, but I'll ask the question to the other panelists as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I would like to start with Jane Black, who we have with us online, who is the accessibility lead of UK and EMEA of the Crawford Technologies, also one of our sponsors today. So what's your take? You're doing document remediation and many other things in your company, but what about the recurring discussion here about AI and the risks and benefits and so on? What's your view on this?
Yeah, I think that AI presents us with a very typical human problem, which is how to understand what's good about something while simultaneously accepting that there are bad things about it as well. And we often get very excited as humans by new developments in technology and rush to embrace them without really thinking about maybe what the long-term outcomes of some of those are. So I think we need to be cautious in our use of AI and clear on where we see it as a benefit and where we see it as maybe producing a negative outcome. And we should definitely be advocating for, I would say, the responsible use of AI. But I also think that we need to provide better education and information around what AI actually is. I mean, the term itself is a very broad term that covers a lot of different things. And some of its applications, as we saw in the previous presentation, are well established and bring enormous benefits. And some are still in their infancy and maybe require us to be a little bit more cautious. So I think we can definitely be excited by some of the possibilities that AI presents, but at the same time clear where it needs to be constrained. And actually, if we go outside of even the area of sort of bias and discrimination, and I think about what we do at Crawford Tech in the document accessibility space, it's also being very clear about producing accurate results if you're using AI. So we provide tools for testing the accessibility of documents, and also, as you said, for document remediation. And that can be individual tools or sort of, large scale automated solutions. And we do have AI built in to our solutions, but we have it built in a way that improves the tools that we provide. And we're careful that when we're deploying it, we don't do it in a way that would compromise the accuracy of the results. So I think as a sector, we should talk about that too. How accurate is the application of the AI that we're using, and steer away from areas where it's not. So I think it can produce great benefits in the accessibility world, but it, like with anything, it can also produce harm. So we need to be using it responsibly. We need to be better educated on what it is, and then better educate on the difference between the two factors.
Thank you very much. So let's go to the other tool maker here on the table. Hello. So Wilco Fierce, the product owner of DQ's Axe core testing tool. I think a tool that most people in this room know what it is. So automatic testing, what's your take on AI?
I think the previous speaker said a lot about the high level things already. I think when it comes to AI technologies, a lot of it comes down to how do you use it? Do you use it to empower people or to put constraints on people? That's the very high of that. But I think within there, there's lots of examples to mention. Susanna, in the previous session, there was mention of using AI in HR, using AI to screen job applicants. That would be an example of a very problematic use of AI. There's other examples, like using it for fraud detection. People with disabilities don't fit neatly into categories where the majority of people fit, and AI trains on recognizing categories like that. So anybody who kind of fits outside of that category, if you're using AI systems to constrain, control, to confine, to categorize people, that very quickly becomes problematic. The flip side of that is that it's an incredibly empowering tool too. Something to, like my favorite example of that I've seen and heard a little bit of talk about is using AI as a way to find out more about an image. If you're blind on the web, what we do today is you provide one text alternative. That's the expected thing. There's one text that needs to describe that image, and that's all you get. If you want to know more, AI lets you actually do that. It lets you analyze that image. It lets you even query what's in the thing. If I want to know what the person in the image is wearing, ask the AI system. There's no way to get that information today. That's an incredibly useful technology that we're going to start seeing more and more of. The other slightly higher level in accessibility, I think adaptive technologies is really where AI is going to take us. Do you want a summary? Get a summary. You want larger buttons on a page? Get larger buttons on the page. It's the potential here is currently kind of unknown, but it seems to me that the constraints that web has had from its start are it's gonna go away. A lot of these constraints just that are built into technologies, they don't have to exist anymore because the AI systems can transform the page to whatever a person who's using that needs it.
So that's kind of more of at an individual level, like my preferences are like this. So I use AI to make it my way, so to speak. Yeah. So that's taking, just to go back to what Tanja Kloit said, that AI in the hands of the user instead of the other way around. So that's really, so very positive. That's fantastic. So we go to Norway, Stian Snoen, who is the accessibility expert, or one of the accessibility expert testers at Include. You are both testing websites and testing with assistive technology as well. So how do you see the use of AI and the potential moving forward? We do not hear you. Do we have sound from Norway? We do not hear you. So maybe Malcolm, somebody at the tech side, if you could try to fix the connection to Stian, and we can move on with the panel and get back to him, if that's okay. I don't know how I can get feedback from someone, but Stian at least nods, so that's good. So let's go to the next question then. I would like to ask about the future. I mean, Hide, you already said made a good list of many things that you're looking forward to. But was this kind of your dream up wish list, or are these things that you see maybe happening in the kind of in my lifetime, or?
Yeah, I mean, my dream list, I guess, is somewhat boring. Like, we need to fix the tag we already have. But listening to Wilco, I feel like, yeah, there's loads of things that we can like give users more control that are going to be very, very helpful. So I'm also looking forward to that.
So Wilco, what would I mean? You already kind of lined out what could potentially happen here, but is there any specific thing around maybe your industry, the tools and everything like that that the new technology could disrupt the whole testing procedures and all of that, or is it more from the user perspective that you see the?
I suspect short term, we are going to see significant advances in just automated testing. Being able to get better understanding of what's on the page and make predictions of what's going on. These technologies are predictive in nature. So they're not going to be like the technologies we have today that tell you this is for sure an accessibility problem. This is, we're going to get technologies that tell you this is likely a problem. Have a look at it. So we're certainly seeing more of that. There's is through technologies like machine vision, where you're now able to identify this thing looks like a button, it doesn't have the necessary tagging for it. Therefore, that's probably an issue. That kind of technology, you're already seeing that here and there. We're certainly using it. Other companies have been using that. I think it's going to go much further than that, to like analyzing the language, something like even straight up just detecting whether this page is in English or in Dutch or in Swedish. That really isn't that complicated AI tech, and we've been able to do that for a long time. It's just figuring out how to communicate it's likely an issue, but make sure you check it yourself, and then who needs that technology and how to integrate technology into the developer process. That I think is what we're going to need to figure out as an industry in the next year or two. Yeah,
that requires also that even more people know what they're talking about, I guess. So
it does a little bit, though these technologies can guide more too.
Interesting. So that brings us back to the kind of need of expertise and skills and things like that. But that's really good to hear. I'm so happy that you're so positive about the future. That's really good. So we're ending on a positive note. That's good. So Jane, what do you foresee in your industry or industry as a whole? I mean, what are the future possibilities out there that you foresee happening?
Yeah, so just to keep that positivity, I do see AI as it develops and improves as actually having the potential to have some real impact on the document accessibility space too. So if you look at the document accessibility end of the digital sort of accessibility spectrum, it's proven to be probably the most challenging, I think, for organizations in being able to reliably make their document content and customer communications truly accessible. I mean, mainly because documents have many more authors and authoring tools, and getting all of these to produce sort of consistent output, and then making sure they meet the sort of guidelines and the standards makes the whole operation, exceedingly complex. And I think as a consequence of that, it seems like organizations have often ignored or at least deprioritized document accessibility issues. So, and I know we often focus in these conversations around web accessibility, which is obviously really key because it's often the first encounter you have with an organization or a service. But as you become a customer, documents are typically the format that provide you with the ongoing information exchange and communications that you have with that organization. So I think in terms of revolutionizing that space, I think the most exciting thing on the horizon is probably around the notion of sort of AI and maybe large language models as an example, as a way to kind of completely collapse the time required to, for example, build the automation that can generate tagged and usable document files at scale from existing systems, for example. I mean, we're not there yet. You know, we can massively reduce the time at the moment by using existing AI down to sort of 60%, maybe down as much as to 25% of the time that it would have taken you before to manually remediate a document. But I think the future in these areas can bring us even greater improvements. And I think as the time is collapsed, it becomes, much easier for organizations to implement that. And also likewise, I think, as was previously said, I think in the area of document accessibility testing too, there are some great improvements to be made there. So I think it's exciting, for work as someone who works in that space, and also as someone who believes that making sure that documents are as accessible as websites. If you really want to be, truly accessible and inclusive, I think it's it's good. There's a lot of improvements on the horizon.
Sounds good. So many of us have kind of tried to put documents on the agenda for a long time. And I think with the Web Accessibility Directive, it should be more in people's minds, but still we have, I don't know, you said we had trillions of websites. How many inaccessible PDFs do we have?
I didn't actually count them, but I think there's a many.
Well, many more.
Yeah. So if something can make documents more accessible or make document accessibility easier, I think you would have many friends in the world if you could make that easier for all the remediation people. So let's try again with Norway to see if we have got some audio from Stian. If you can say something so that we can
try. Do you hear me?
Yes, we do hear you. Good. So
yeah. Okay. Because working with accessibility is that maybe sometimes you have problems with using technology, and so my perspective on AI is that this is good for, but it also be some issues with manual testing, because when you can make test lists and you can maybe think that you also have to do manual testing with screen readers and also assistive technology, and that will not be tested by AI. So this is my perspective, is that this can be good, but it can also have some issues. So you maybe think you have to use it and you have to think about how we can use it to make things more accessible. So I'm using screen reader every day, so I maybe know where the problems are, and many of the problem is that people are not making good enough web pages or application. People are doing this same things wrong on web pages because they don't have accessible names, or they don't have any good headings, and then you can maybe use AI to text some of it, but some of it you also need to have manual testing to fix it.
Yeah, so it may help, but it's not solving everything. But I think that is kind of the conclusion of the whole thing. We need to use it in a good way, but we also need to make sure that we have it kind of in the hands of humans as long as we can. So I don't know if we have any questions from the audience here in Brussels. No, they didn't have coffee in the last hour. So yes, Malin, please.
I thought it was interesting that you said that web browsers doesn't interpret the HTML code in an accessible way. Would that kind of be saying that web browsers could use more of the standard they are up to at a tag to make a more inclusive experience in the future?
Yeah, I mean, there's WCAG, there's ATAG for CMSs, and there's UAC for browsers, and they should follow it more, for sure. Yeah, because the thing that we've always told developers is like, if you use HTML, you're good because HTML has accessibility built in. It's accessible by default. But sometimes it's the case that when you do use HTML, it's still inaccessible. And I think that's a kind of trap that we set for developers that we shouldn't be setting, because like, yeah, that demotivates people, and it results in experiences for people with disabilities that aren't good, which is the main point, right? In the end, that's discrimination, I guess, right? So browsers need to get their things sorted. But these are very complex code bases that don't get a lot of priority for a lot of different parts. They don't have many developers and not many, a lot of issues to work on in their defense.
Okay, we have another question here.
Yeah, hi, Einars. I'm trying to formulate the question, but since we have Wilco and the developers behind, so you're behind the tools, and your tools are obviously used in Europe, across Europe. Do you have an overview when we come to monitoring and sort of website scoring from your IT point of view? In which country the websites are better or worse? Does it make sense? Yesterday in the workshop, we kind of went through these discussions. Can you have a meaningful scores? What do they mean? Can you compare between countries? What is your point from the IT point of view, from the developer? Can it be done? Can we do the test and ask AI, sort of give the score? Just your feeling about it, because yesterday the conclusion was you can't do it. You have to test it manually, everything, and have users and usability. So we kind of left it open. What's the industry is thinking about it?
I don't think the industry has one answer for you. There are lots of scoring solutions out there that companies have developed, that different organizations have developed. I don't think there's a perfect answer for that. One thing that I spotted and kind of liked, just looking all across the monitoring that was done, is possibly comparing on success criteria levels. Which success criteria, how many success criteria were failed across this website. That's a very, very, very rough estimate, but it's certainly better than nothing. And it seemed that most monitoring agencies are already looking at that and reporting that information. So that might be something to just at least get you started on.
Which country?
Oh, which country? Sorry, obviously the Netherlands is best.
Sorry, we're biased.
Okay, that was unexpected. No, it was expected, I guess. Should have been. Yes. No, absolutely not. So, so I wanted to connect kind of the future and the evolution, and things are going so quickly now. Development is so quickly that I think not only I struggle to understand what is happening, and certainly public sector bodies struggle to understand what they should use, and some developers as well, and so on. So how could we, as a society, as a community, or even IAAP, how could we support in making sure that when all these new things come to the market, that they are somehow tested or validated, or I don't know, but it seems like there's a lot of new things happening that could have a great potential, but we all smart people say be careful in the beginning. At the same time, we want to foster innovation, and we want people we want it to be a community or companies, to a market, to develop new things. So what's the balance there, and how do we navigate that kind of push for innovation, but still be careful so that we don't forget the accessibility piece of that? How do we, I know this is probably impossible question, but I would just like to hear you reflect on it. I don't know if you, Wilco, you're usually philosophical, so you can start.
Thank you. Also, prove me wrong about the Dutch one. Come prove me wrong. To answer your question. Yeah, it's a very complicated question. I think the best thing we, as a accessibility community, can do is to get involved with these companies doing their AI work, get involved in the companies adopting these technologies, have those conversations, especially the part where they're using these technologies to detect fraud, to scan resumes, to do voice detection, scary exclusive stuff like that. We need to be in the room. I don't think we're quite enough in the room, and I feel like as an industry, we're very good at clumping together, but not so good at going out and informing these people of what they need. I also think it would be helpful for us and as an industry to sit down and think about what should inclusive AI look like? What are the needs for people in disabilities? What are the do's and don'ts? None of that work, as far as I'm aware, has started yet. But I'd love to know more if anybody does know of any.
So a new workshop planned already.
There you go.
That's good. So Stian, from your perspective, how can we, either you as an expert or we as a community, support this and make sure that we get a positive future development?
I mean, I think that you need to test it with different persons with different both disabilities and not with disabilities to make sure that things get right. Because and in Norway we have this accessibility statement for government web pages that they have to say in which how they are about in to WCAG 2.1. So that maybe think that you used to have to test it, and you have to make sure that things are working well for persons with these different assistive technologies and not with accessible technologies. And for that will be good for persons with disabilities, good for everyone, and the benefits of it is very high, because when something works well for me, it works well for many others and without disabilities.
Yeah, so we had the same thing in the chat also, that involving people with disabilities is really important if we hope to avoid many of the potential challenges. So I said that I think that's kind of echoing what you were just saying, Stian. So Jane, what do you think? How do we navigate this?
Yeah, so I think in terms of looking to the future and I mean everything that's been said previously, I think I would agree with all of that. But I also think that we need to also help educate people on what exists currently today. So I know, Susanna, when you and I were discussing this panel, we talked about how, for example, documents, albeit them in scope in the Web Accessibility Directive, are often like the family member that no one discusses at the dinner table, the poor cousin in the digital accessibility world, if you like. And unfortunately, I think the impact of that is that a lot of organizations don't really know what tools and solutions exist out there currently today that could help them in a really sort of simple and cost-effective way. And I'm not just talking about, manual remediation tools or testing tools. I'm talking about large solutions that can take, an organization's entire customer communication set and make it accessible. And I think it's important to sort of embrace, I think, that we go beyond just the realms of things like websites and website documents, and we really kind of evangelize and educate people around, how they can then make these kind of, high volume customer communications accessible, how they can do that based on even content that they've created today that isn't accessible, and even within their existing systems. So, I think the impact of not doing that, as we've seen recently in the UK, is, very large government organization, I'm not sure, were they not aware of making, how important it was to make their communications accessible, or did they not know that there are already solutions that could have helped them? So I think it's important to, focus on the future and be involved and talk about what lies in the future. But I think it's also important that we make sure, certainly I would say in the document accessibility world, that we make organizations aware of what exists and help them understand that there are things that they could be doing right now.
Yes, thank you. So that's a kind of a recurring thing in these 2 days that the end users don't really know about the accessibility features that are built in systems, and the public sector body doesn't know how to post their requirements. And now, so it's lack of skills and lack of knowledge and experience, and we do have a lot of cool things and good technology out there already. So we should just make sure that everyone uses them in the right way. So that is a tricky question on how we make people aware and make that information available to everyone. But let's try to do it. And I'll give the last word to you, Heather, so that you can both start and close this very nicely. So you have 2 minutes to tell us the solution of everything around. No, no, but just how we make sure that we don't end up in the kind of the negative path that you also talked about with.
Yeah, I think my main worry would be that we would be too naive. So people get very excited when new technology comes out. I know I do. And then it's point and key to kind of sit down and look at what the actual implications could be. And like the tool that I showed earlier, that one was released with accessibility problems, and it turned out they had 0 people with disabilities involved. So people are going to build these tools, and they are not going to involve us necessarily. So we've got to make sure we get a seat at the table. I think everyone else also said that, but I think that's super important. Get involved. If you don't have a seat at the table, still get involved. I think we can't just watch this happen, because like you said, the developments go very quickly. And some of these developments automate in accessibility, and that's my main worry, I guess. That's what I'd be find very dangerous if that would happen. All of our efforts would be undone, right? That's my sort of worst feature. Am I going to end with that? Yeah, I guess so. We can try and find a more positive angle to this afterwards. I suppose.
Yeah, but Wilco said that everything will be fine, and this will be disrupting those. So that let's listen.
Wilco is going to fix that.
Yeah. Okay, but we need to wrap up. So thank you, all of you, for this insights and sharing your thoughts and experiences. And I look forward to all the cool things that was going to happen in the future. Thank you.
Thanks.